Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not real, I whispered, leaning in so Clara could hear every word. Her face paled, but she forced herself to ask, "How do you know?" "You feel them," I said, my voice low and steady. "The goosebumps crawling over your skin, even though it's not cold. The way the air tastes wrong, dry and stale, choking you. That lump in your throat that makes you feel like you'll never swallow again. That's how they let you know. They're close. And when they're close..." Her eyes widened. "What happens?" "You've got about 10 minutes after you notice them," I said, staring her down. "Then they force themselves inside you. After that, it's over." Her lips trembled. "How do you get away?" "No one ever has." The car's engine hummed as silence wrapped around us. I turned to her slowly. "Wait, did you feel something?" "Stop it," she snapped, but I pointed to her arms. "Clara, look." Her gaze dropped, and she froze. The fine hairs on her arms stood on end. "You've already got the goosebumps," I murmured. Her scream pierced the car, sharp and sudden. She thrashed against her seatbelt, eyes wild. Her pale skin looked almost translucent under the flickering light of the dashboard. "Mark, stop scaring your sister." Mom scolded from the front seat, turning around briefly to glare at me, ... "Mom, I can feel them." Clara cried, her voice rising to a wail. I leaned toward her, carefully blowing air from the corner of my mouth. She shuddered, her panic growing. "Ghosts aren't real, Clara. You're 12. You should know better," Dad said without looking back, his voice tight as his hands gripped the steering wheel. Clara clutched her chest, glaring at him. "Then how come your mouth didn't move when you said that?" The air in the car thickened, heavy and suffocating. For a moment, no one spoke. Then came the sound of sharp, rhythmic tapping against the window. Clara shrieked, clawing at her seatbelt, and I burst out laughing. Dad rolled down the window, his jaw tense as the park ranger leaned in, shadowed by the brim of his hat. "Camping registration?" the ranger asked, his deep voice cutting through the tension. Dad handed him a crumpled printout without a word. "Long drive, huh?" the ranger continued, glancing at us. Clara was still trembling, her hands curled into fists, while I struggled to stifle my laughter. "Yeah," Dad muttered. "California," the ranger nodded. "Well, welcome to Utah. Did you kids know the Panda is the largest living organism in the world? Its root system's been alive for over 80,000 years. Clara raised her hand like we were in school, her enthusiasm misplaced amidst the eerie tension. "I knew that." "Well then," the ranger said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Enjoy your stay." As we drove deeper into the forest, the trees closed in around us. Shadows stretched long and thin, their edges razor-sharp under the fading light. Clara's hand crept toward mine, and I didn't pull away. The silence in the car wasn't comforting. It was watching, waiting. By the time we reached the campsite, the sun had vanished. And so had the laughter. I helped Dad set up the tent while Mom unpacked the car. Clara just sat on a log, staring at the sunset. It felt unfair, but Clara not helping wasn't exactly new. Still, the light was strange here. Even after the sun dipped below the horizon, it didn't really get dark. Twilight stretched on, unnatural and endless, as if the night itself had forgotten how to fall. The air was too still, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I glanced at Clara, hoping she'd notice how weird everything felt. Maybe she'd finally believe in the ghosts I'd teased her about earlier. But she just sat there, her pale face bathed in that eerie, unchanging light. Maybe she wasn't really afraid before. Maybe she'd just been pretending, putting on a show for me, ... "Can you hear them?" she asked suddenly. Her voice startled me. "Hear who?" I asked, stepping closer. "The trees." She didn't look at me. Her gaze stayed locked on the shadows stretching across the forest floor. They've been waiting for me for a long time. I rolled my eyes. She was just trying to creep me out revenge for earlier. "What are they saying?" I asked, playing along. Clara turned to me then, her skin almost glowing in the endless twilight. Her smile didn't look like hers. It was too sharp, too wide, like it didn't belong on her face. "They don't speak with words," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It's more like feelings, images, ideas. The trembling giant is angry. A slow, smoldering anger, like a glacier grinding through a mountain. It's been trapped too long, and it needs me to set it loose." I shivered despite myself. "Dinner's ready," I said quickly. "Come on." I turned back toward the fire, walking fast, unwilling to let her see me shudder. When I glanced over my shoulder, she was still sitting there, her teeth glowing faintly in the gathering dusk. The next day was miserable. Clara was too tired to hike, and Mom insisted we couldn't leave her behind. "The whole point of this trip is to spend time together as a family," she said. So instead of exploring the endless forest, we sat in the dirt, whittling sticks, singing songs, weaving baskets, all while the forest loomed around us, ancient and silent. I itched to run, to climb, to lose myself in the wild labyrinth of trees. "Look how nice your sister's basket is turning out," Mom said, trying to sound cheerful. "Can I make a really big one?" I asked. "Of course, you can make whatever you want." "Okay," I said, my voice flat. "I'm going to weave a coffin. Then you can just bury me." "Don't even joke about that," Dad grunted. "Better yet, I'll make one for Clara. If she's too sick to do anything fun, she might as well." "Mark!" Mom's voice snapped like a whip. I knew I'd crossed a line, but I didn't care. I was bored out of my mind. They gave Clara everything she wanted, but if I wanted something, I was being selfish. "I'm going to the woods," I muttered, standing up. "Stay close," Dad said sharply. "Don't get lost." Getting lost didn't sound so bad. The forest was endless, a cathedral of pale white giants stretching into the horizon. The fallen trees twisted together like bones, creating a maze of shadowy paths. Lush ferns carpeted the ground, hiding secrets beneath their curling fronds. I wandered deeper, breathing in the still, humid air. It smelled old, like damp stone and rotting leaves. The thought that all these trees were part of one massive ancient organism sent a shiver of awe through me. I knelt and began digging at the hard-packed earth with a stick, hoping to find a root, to see if it felt alive. The ground resisted, as if the forest didn't want me to disturb it. As I worked, I remembered when Clara and I were younger, how she'd follow me everywhere, her endless enthusiasm making her the perfect sidekick. But now, the silence pressed in around me, thick and heavy. I stopped digging and looked up. The pale trees swayed without wind, their shadows moving like fingers reaching for something unseen. I thought of Clara's smile from the night before, and for the first time, I wondered if she'd really been joking. What was the point of playing games on your phone? There was no one around to cheer your victories or warn you of your defeats. The screen flickered dimly in the fading light, mocking me, and my frustration grew, mounting with every useless tap. I needed to do something, anything, to escape the crushing emptiness of the moment. In a fit of anger, I grabbed a stick and rammed it into the dirt with all my force. My breath came ragged, sweat dripping down my face, muscles aching, but I didn't stop. I pushed harder, digging faster, as if the earth itself had wronged me. The stick snapped in two, the sharp crack echoing in the silent air, and I felt an irrational surge of fury. Why did it make me so angry? I didn't know. I dropped to my hands and knees, the dirt scraping against my palms, and began clawing at the earth. My fingers dug into the soil, shredding through rocks and clods of dirt. Each movement left fresh cuts, each breath came shorter than the last, but I couldn't stop. I was about to give up when my hand suddenly broke through a thick tangle of roots. A hole. The dirt and pebbles I dislodged cascaded into it, vanishing into the darkness below. I couldn't hear them land. The hole must have been deep. It felt wrong, too quiet. But I couldn't turn back now. My frustration spurred me on. I spent hours widening the hole, feeling every scrape, every bleeding finger, as the sun beat down on me with relentless disdain. But I didn't care. I had opened it wide enough now, wide enough to slip inside. I climbed into the hole, my heart pounding, the roots forming a thick, gnarled net that held me in place as I descended. My phone's flashlight flickered weakly in the vast, suffocating dark, a useless pinprick in the vast cavern I found myself in. The space felt ancient. It wasn't just underground, it was alive. The roots of countless trees converged here, twining together into massive, tangled tapestries. The trees above seemed fragile in comparison to the thick, twisted columns below. I clambered down, deeper and deeper, following the winding paths of roots until I reached a small circular space, far larger than my body. It was like being inside an egg, its surface made of thick, suffocating wood, pressing in from all sides. The silence was overwhelming. It was so complete that I could hear my heart beating, a frantic rhythm that fractured the stillness. "Can you hear them?" Clara's voice echoed in my mind, wide-eyed, innocent, asking her question under the open sky. But here, buried in the bowels of the earth, I understood. I pressed my hand against a knot of roots, feeling the heat beneath them. And then I felt it, the pulse, the thrum of something ancient, something aware. It wasn't the trees that were speaking. It was the earth itself. This place had been growing long before humans existed, long before anything we know. It had been touched by forces we couldn't comprehend, forgotten gods, perhaps, or beings who once walked the earth in a time before history. Or maybe it was the earth itself, living through these towering roots, dormant, but seething with a quiet, burning anger. The warmth in the roots intensified as I pressed deeper, my skin prickling as if they were responding to me. I could feel the silent scream of the earth, a sound too deep for my ears to register. The longer I held on, the more intense the sensation became. In my mind's eye, visions flared to life, rivers of fire running through the depths of the earth, consuming cities, reducing them to ashes. Towers crumbled. People scurried through the streets, lost in a madness they couldn't understand. Blood flowed, churning in the ruins of the world. The heat in the roots became unbearable. My hand burned as if the earth itself was trying to pull me into its depths. I ripped my hand away, gasping for breath. This wasn't just a ghost. This was real. And I had to show Clara. I had to watch her face when she saw what I had found. I scrambled up the roots, dragging myself through the tangled web of them, hands scraping against the rough wood as I clawed my way to the surface. The air felt thick and suffocating, like something was waiting beneath, watching me struggle. My heart pounded in my chest as I rushed back to the campsite. "What in the world?" my mother started, but I didn't let her finish. "Where's Clara?" I barked, breathless. "She went to lie down for a little while," Mom said, her voice laced with concern. "How did you get so filthy?" But I didn't wait for her to finish. I stormed toward Clara's tent, flinging the flap open. I grabbed her, nearly pulling her out of bed by the arm. "Just for a second," I urged, my voice sharp. "You can sleep anytime. This is what we came here for." Mom and Dad protested from behind, but I didn't care. I was too focused on Clara's face, on showing her the secret I'd discovered. It was the only thing that mattered now. "It's okay, Mom," Clara mumbled, dragging herself out into the sun. "I'm here to spend time with Mark too." There it was again. Mom and Dad's hands, clenching together so tightly their knuckles turned white, their arms trembling. I ignored it. I couldn't care less about whatever they were hiding. All that mattered was what I was about to show Clara. They offered to come with us, but I knew that would ruin everything. I wanted this to be ours, a secret between just the two of us. I was relieved when Clara agreed to come with me. Lately, it seemed like she didn't want to do anything at all. "You felt it, didn't you?" she said once we were alone, her voice barely above a whisper. "Felt what?" I asked, forcing a casualness into my tone, though my pulse was racing. "The thing," she said. "The calling." I frowned, confused. You're not just messing with me, are you? Because I believe it. When have I ever tried to trick you? I feigned innocence, knowing full well I had done it many times before. She snickered. How about when you wrote soul flavor on the ice cream box so you wouldn't have to share? That was one time, I muttered. And besides, you thought the cactus had soft spines like cat fur. She laughed again, but it wasn't like before. There was something more haunted in it now, something resigned. We walked in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken things hanging between us, ... I guess I don't know why I still believe you, she said suddenly, looking up at me. Maybe it's because I don't have much time left. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know how to respond to that. So I just kept walking. That's why we're here, you know, she said, her voice softer now. This might be the last time we're all together. Before it's over. I didn't let her finish. I squatted down beside the hole, my hands trembling as I motioned for her to follow me. Give me a hand, okay? She didn't hesitate. Feet first, she began lowering herself into the hole. I steadied her, not looking at her face, just keeping my eyes focused on her hands, the way they gripped the roots. I understood what she was saying, even if I didn't want to hear it. I don't want to be down here, she whispered, her voice shaking, but I didn't acknowledge it. I couldn't. We continued deeper into the roots, the walls of the cave closing in around us. There was a sense of being trapped, but I didn't care. My pulse quickened with every step. Finally, we reached the enclosed space, the roots so thick around us that they almost felt like they were pulling us in. There wasn't enough room for both of us to fit into the nest at once, so I helped her climb in, then waited outside the small opening. Her fingers brushed against the roots, a shiver running through her. She jerked her hand back, but then, to my surprise, she touched it again, this time with reverence. The little smile on her face didn't feel right. It stretched into something euphoric, something wrong, as she massaged the roots gently, almost tenderly. You feel it, don't you? I asked, my voice tight, though I already knew the answer. She smiled, eyes closed, lost in the sensation. I feel it, she whispered, the words drifting like smoke in the dark. The silence pressed in around us again, so heavy it made my ears ring. What made you think it was calling for you? I asked, though the words felt hollow in my mouth. But before she could respond, something else answered. It was that scream again, the one too deep to hear, but its presence was undeniable, reverberating through everything. It echoed from the very heart of the earth, crawling through every part of the forest, the silent gaps between the trees, the long-forgotten paths, all pulsing with an ancient throb. Even outside the egg, I could still feel it, a vast waking presence, coiled deep within my mind, demanding attention. Thoughts pressed in, suffocating, so vivid that I might as well have been seeing them with my eyes. Energy rose from the earth itself, bubbling up, exhaling into the air, leaving behind an abyss so deep and vast that it seemed to tear through the planet's core. Clara, what's happening? What do you see? My voice was barely a whisper, lost in the swelling noise of something immense. Even shining the light in her face, I couldn't see only the fire in my belly, the pounding pressure growing just enough for me to hear it, the low rumble like the earth itself was splitting apart. Clara, get out of here. Something's going to happen, I choked out, panic creeping into my words. I know. I'm making it happen. Her voice, small and distant, barely registered over the overwhelming presence. We both need each other, she said. I need you to guide me. You need me too. Clara, where are you? I shouted, reaching into the thick darkness. Quick, grab my hand if I'm gonna. The vision spun too violently for me to make sense of anything. My hands, frantic and trembling, kept grazing against the roots, but there was no ground beneath them, only the dizzying depths pulling at me, ... Tell Mom and Dad I didn't die, I muttered to myself, caught in the haze of shifting thoughts. I'll never die. Why couldn't I find the hole? I had been standing right over it just moments ago. Where was it? Where had it gone? It wasn't until I dropped to my stomach that I realized the horrifying truth. The hole, it wasn't just gone. The roots had closed in on it, weaving tighter, sealing Clara inside the earth. "Clara, can you hear me?" My voice trembled, raw with fear. "Clara, get out!" Her reply was so faint, like it came from the bottom of a chasm. "I am out, Mark. No more tricks. No more games." The certainty in her voice shattered me. "You're the one who should be running," she said. "It's too late for you." I ran. I scrambled up the roots, desperate to tear myself from the ground. And even though I hated it, I couldn't deny the truth of her words. Some might call it cowardice, but in that moment, I trusted her more than I trusted myself. The vibrations, the silent scream, it was all too much. Even above the ground, I could still feel it, a presence so deep, so powerful, it made my entire body hum. I gasped for breath as I reached the surface, and with everything I had, I screamed. My lungs burned as the world around me seemed to tremble. I don't know how long it lasted. Time felt meaningless, warped in that instant. When I finally stopped, the forest was still eerily, unnervingly silent. The earth had stopped shaking. The visions, the dreadful pull of the abyss, they were gone, leaving nothing but emptiness. Except for one thing. On the bark of an aspen tree, there was the faint outline of Clara's face, etched into the wood as though it had always been there.